Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The blade didn't hurt at first. It was the coldness of the steel against his throat that registered before the pain, a biting chill that severed the timeline of his life. Valerius gasped, his body jerking violently as if pulled from the depths of a drowning pool, his lungs screaming for air that tasted not of metallic blood, but of expensive sandalwood and freezing winter air. He wasn't bleeding out on the marble floor of the execution grounds. He was sitting upright in a bed large enough to sleep 5, clutching sheets made of silk so fine it felt like water against his trembling skin. His heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Asterisk thump, thump, thump asterisk, a war drum announcing he was alive. He looked down at his hands. Pale, slender, uncalloused. He touched his neck. Smooth, unbroken. Then, the memories assaulted him, a headache splitting his skull. Not his memories, but the script. The narrative. He wasn't just Valerius, the third prince of the fallen kingdom of Ethelgard. He was Valerius, the canon fodder consort from the web novel The Emperor's Winter, a story he had hate-read in his previous life just hours ago. He knew exactly where he was. Chapter 1. The wedding night. The night the tyrannical northern emperor, Kaiserin von Draven, would enter this room, look at him with disdain, and leave him to rot in the cold palace until his eventual execution in Chapter 20 for a crime he didn't commit. The heavy oak doors groaned open. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Valerius stiffened, the residual phantom pain of a severed throat making his pulse flutter. Kaiserin walked in. To call him handsome was a reduction of the truth. He was a catastrophe of beauty. Standing well over 6 feet, encased in a military uniform of obsidian black with silver epaulets, the emperor looked less like a groom and more like a reaper. His hair was the color of falling snow, falling over eyes that were a piercing, inhuman gold. He didn't walk. He stalked, closing the distance to the bed with a predator's economy of movement. In the novel, Valerius was supposed to weep. He was supposed to beg for mercy, which would only disgust the emperor further. Kaiserin stopped at the foot of the bed, his hand resting on the pommel of the ceremonial sword at his hip. So, his voice was a deep baritone, smooth like velvet dragged over gravel. This is the tribute Ethelgard sends to appease me. A trembling omega who smells of fear. Valerius swallowed the bile rising in his throat. Asterisk if I cry, I die? If I beg, I die? The script demands my death to make room for the protagonist, Lysander, who arrives in 3 months. Asterisk. Valerius dug his fingernails into his palms until the skin broke. The sharp pain grounded him. He lifted his chin, forcing his trembling lips into a thin, cold line. He locked eyes with the man who was destined to sign his death warrant. Fear is a survival instinct, Your Majesty, Valerius said, his voice steadier than he felt. It is not a character flaw, and I am not a tribute. I am a transaction. Kaiserin's golden eyes narrowed. This wasn't in the script. The original Valerius had been a stuttering mess. A transaction? Kaiserin stepped closer, the scent of pine and ozone, his alpha pheromones, rolling off him in suffocating waves. You overestimate your value. Your kingdom is ash. Your father is dead. You are a spoil of war, nothing more. A spoil of war you cannot afford to discard. Valerius countered, swinging his legs off the bed and standing. He was shorter than Kaiserin, forced to look up, but he refused to cower. You conquered Ethelgard for its mines, but you don't know how to navigate the subterranean labyrinths. The maps were burned before your troops arrived. Without them, the mines are useless tombs. Kaiserin's expression didn't shift, but the air around him grew heavier, more dangerous. He reached out, his gloved hand gripping Valerius's jaw, forcing his head back. The grip was bruising. And I suppose you have these maps tucked away in your wedding silks? I have them in my head, Valerius lied. He didn't have the maps. But he had read the novel. He knew exactly where the deposits were because the author had spent 3 excruciating chapters describing the mining logistics. Kill me, exile me, or ignore me, and your empire loses its gold. Keep me, and I will make you richer than God. Kaiserin stared at him, searching for the deception. The silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. For a moment, Valerius thought the emperor would simply snap his neck right there. It would be a plot hole. Why kill the key to the mines? But tyrants in these novels were rarely logical. Then, Kaiserin released him, shoving him back slightly. A cruel, amused smirk touched his lips. A concubine who bargains, Kaiserin mused. Interesting. Very well. You have 1 month. If the first mine yields nothing, I will hang you from the palace walls myself. Kaiserin turned on his heel and marched out, the heavy cloak swirling behind him. Valerius sank back onto the bed, his legs giving out. He was alive. He had survived the prologue. But as he looked at the closing door, he knew the game had only just begun. He wasn't fighting for love. He was fighting for his life against a plot that wanted him dead. The first week was a lesson in isolation. The Imperial Palace of the North was a sprawling Gothic monstrosity of black stone and stained glass, perpetually shrouded in winter mist. The servants ignored him, the guards watched him with open suspicion, and the court whispered that the Ethelgardian whore would be dead before the first snow melted. Valerius didn't care about their whispers. He cared about survival. He spent his days in the archives, frantically cross-referencing his knowledge of the novel with the actual geography of the world. He drew maps from memory, his hands stained with ink, knowing that one wrong coordinate meant his execution. He saw Kaiserin only from a distance, a dark silhouette on the balcony, watching the troops drill, or a cold presence at the end of the long dining table where they ate in silence. But the silence broke on the 10th day. Valerius was in the library, standing on a ladder to reach a tome on geological formations, when the ladder swayed. It was old wood, rotted by the damp climate. With a sharp crack, a rung gave way. Valerius braced for the impact, closing his eyes. But the impact never came. An arm, hard as iron, caught him around the waist, arresting his fall with effortless strength. Valerius gasped, his eyes flying open to find himself chest to chest with the Emperor. Kaiserin held him easily, as if Valerius weighed no more than a feather. Up close, the Emperor was overwhelming. The scar that ran through his left eyebrow, a detail barely mentioned in the book, gave his face a rugged, dangerous texture. "You are clumsy," Kaiserin stated, not setting him down. The ladder was faulty, Valerius retorted, his heart racing from the adrenaline and the proximity. Perhaps if the imperial budget focused on library maintenance rather than just weaponry, the consorts wouldn't risk their necks reading. Kaiserin's eyes glinted. "You have a sharp tongue for a hostage. Have you finished the maps?" "I am halfway done." "Good." Kaiserin lowered him, but didn't step back. He was invading Valerius's personal space, a deliberate power move. "Because my generals are restless. They doubt the word of a fallen prince." "Let them doubt." Valerius brushed dust off his tunic, regaining his composure. "Results do not require belief." Kaiserin studied him, a strange expression crossing his face. In the novel, this was the period where Kaiserin was supposed to be pining for the White Lotus protagonist, Lysander, who was currently a medic in the border towns. Kaiserin shouldn't be looking at Valerius with curiosity. "You are different than the reports suggested," Kaiserin murmured, almost to himself. "The spies said you were soft. Spoiled. War changes people, Your Majesty," Valerius said quietly. "I realize that being soft is a luxury I can no longer afford." For a second, the cruelty in Kaiserin's eyes softened, replaced by a flicker of recognition. Kaiserin, too, had been a discarded prince once, fighting his way to the throne through blood and betrayal. It was a parallel the author had drawn but never utilized. "Be at the War Council tomorrow," Kaiserin ordered, turning away abruptly as if burned. "Do not disappoint me." The War Council was a pit of vipers. 12 generals sat around a massive table, maps sprawled before them. When Valerius entered, the room went silent. "This is improper," General Vargas, a man with a beard like steel wool, grunted. "An Omega in the war room? An enemy Omega. He is here by my command," Kaiserin said from the head of the table. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a guillotine blade. "Speak, Valerius." Valerius stepped forward. He laid his drawn map over the existing one. "Your current excavation in Sector 4 is useless. You're digging into granite. The vein shifts south, under the riverbed." "Impossible," Vargas slammed his fist down. "The river would flood the shafts. Not if you divert the flow using the aqueducts built by the ancients." Valerius pointed to a faint line on his map. The infrastructure is there. You just haven't looked for it because you assumed the ancients were primitive. The room erupted in arguments. Valerius stood his ground, answering every technical question with the precision of someone who had memorized the wiki page of the novel. He wasn't just reciting facts, he was rewriting his worth. As the meeting adjourned, with the generals begrudgingly accepting the new plan, Valerius felt a gaze burning into him. He looked up to see Kaiserin watching him. There was no disdain left. There was respect. And something darker. Possession. That night, Valerius didn't sleep alone. He wasn't summoned to the emperor's bed for sex. The slow burn of their relationship was agonizingly paced, but for strategy. Kaiserin brought documents to Valerius's chambers. They sat by the fire, discussing logistics, supply lines, and court politics until the candles burned low. "Why do you know so much about military supply lines?" Kaiserin asked, pouring 2 glasses of wine. The informality was shocking. Valerius froze. He couldn't say, "Because I read about your campaigns in a web novel." I listened, he improvised. "My father ignored me, so I sat in the corners of his meetings." People forget the quiet ones are listening. Kaiserin swirled his wine, the red liquid catching the firelight. "They do. It is a fatal mistake." He looked at Valerius, his gaze dropping to Valerius's lips, then back to his eyes. "I find myself wondering what else you are hiding, Valerius." "Nothing that would harm you," Valerius whispered. "We shall see." The turning point came 2 months in. The maps had proven accurate. Gold was flowing into the treasury. Valerius had secured his safety, or so he thought. Then he arrived. Lysander, the protagonist. He arrived at court amidst a flurry of white petals, a medic who had saved a platoon of soldiers. He was petite, with doe eyes and hair like spun gold. He was the epitome of the perfect omega, sweet, submissive, and pure. Valerius watched from the balcony as Lysander was presented to the emperor. He felt a sickening lurch in his stomach. This was it. The plot was self-correcting. The hero had arrived to claim his beast. In the novel, Kaiserin fell for Lysander instantly. Valerius prepared himself for the cold shoulder, for the exile. But that evening, during the grand banquet to honor Lysander, something was wrong. Valerius sat at the emperor's left hand. Lysander sat at the right. The court watched with bated breath. Lysander smiled shyly at Kaiserin. "Your Majesty, I have heard tales of your bravery. It is an honor to serve you." Kaiserin barely glanced at him. "Your service is noted. You will be compensated." It was dismissive, cold. Then, Kaiserin turned to Valerius, picking up a piece of fruit and placing it on Valerius's plate. "You haven't eaten. The stress of the council meetings is affecting your appetite." The court gasped. The emperor, known for his ruthlessness, was mother-henning the cannon fodder? Lysander's smile faltered. A flash of something sharp and ugly crossed the protagonist's face before vanishing behind a mask of innocence. Valerius saw it, and he realized something terrifying. Lysander wasn't the innocent hero. The author had written from a limited perspective. Lysander was a manipulator. Later that night, the assassination attempt happened. Valerius was walking through the garden, needing air, when he heard the soft thwip of a crossbow. His body moved before his mind could catch up. The muscle memory of the original body, combined with his own desperation, threw him forward. Kaiserin. He shoved the emperor aside just as a black bolt whistled through the air, embedding itself in the stone pillar where Kaiserin's head had been a second ago. Valerius crashed into the snow, Kaiserin landing on top of him. "Guards!" Kaiserin roared, his voice shaking the palace foundations. He looked down at Valerius. "Are you hit?" "No." Valerius panted, adrenaline coursing through him. "I'm fine." Kaiserin grabbed him, hauling him up, his hands frantically checking Valerius for injuries. The icy composure of the emperor was shattered. His eyes were wide with a raw, terrifying panic. "You foolish, idiotic creature," Kaiserin hissed, pulling Valerius into a crushing embrace. "Why would you do that? You are a political hostage. You are not a shield. I am your partner." Valerius mumbled into the fur of Kaiserin's cloak. "The gold mines, remember? You need me." "Damn the gold." Kaiserin pulled back, gripping Valerius's shoulders. "Do you think I care about the gold when you are throwing yourself in front of arrows?" The silence that followed was heavy with realization. "You care," Valerius whispered, the shock of it hitting him. You actually care. Kaiserin looked as if he wanted to argue, but the truth was written plainly on his face. He leaned in, his forehead resting against Valerius's. I have spent a lifetime surrounded by people who want something from me. Power. Money. Protection. You. You are the only one who has ever offered me something without asking for a crown in return. I asked for your survival, Valerius said. Then you have it, Kaiserin swore. And I swear to you, whoever fired that bolt will scream for days before they die. The investigation was swift. The bolt was traced back not to a foreign assassin, but to a hired mercenary paid by a shell company. A company that, Valerius discovered through his knowledge of the novel's obscure footnotes, was linked to Lysander's family in the south. The protagonist was the villain. It made perfect sense. Lysander wanted the throne, and he needed Kaiserin dead, or seduced, and controlled, to get it. The confrontation happened in the throne room. Lysander stood before the emperor, tears streaming down his beautiful face. It is a lie. Valerius is framing me. He is jealous, your majesty. He is a snake from a fallen kingdom. Kaiserin sat on the obsidian throne, Valerius standing at his side, not as a consort, but as an equal. Jealousy requires envy, Kaiserin said coldly. Valerius has no reason to envy you. He has my trust. He has my ear. And, Kaiserin stood up, descending the steps, he has my heart. The admission rang through the hall like a bell. Lysander's mask crumbled. You monster. You were supposed to be mine. The prophecy said. I burn prophecies, Kaiserin snarled. He signaled the guards. Take him away. If he is a medic, let him tend to the lepers in the wastelands. Let us see how pure his heart truly is. As Lysander was dragged away screaming, the court fell into a stunned silence. The narrative was broken. The story had changed. Kaiserin turned to Valerius. The emperor looked tired, the weight of the crown heavy, but his eyes were clear. You knew, Kaiserin said softly. You knew he wasn't what he seemed. How? I have good instincts, Valerius said, stepping closer. Your instincts saved my life. Again, Kaiserin reached out, his fingers tracing the line of Valerius's jaw. You said you were a transaction. That contract is void. Valerius felt a cold pit in his stomach. You were sending me away? No. Kaiserin pulled him close, his other arm wrapping around Valerius's waist, possessive and firm. I am renegotiating. No more transactions. No more hostages. He leaned down, his lips brushing against Valerius's ear, sending a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with the winter cold. Rule with me, Kaiserin whispered. Not behind me. Beside me. Let them call you the Viper of the North. I do not care. As long as you are my Viper. Valerius looked up into the golden eyes that had terrified him in Chapter 1. He saw the reflection of a man who had defied fate, rewritten a novel, and tamed a tyrant not with sweetness, but with steel. I accept the terms, Valerius smiled. Kaiserin kissed him then, a searing, claiming kiss that tasted of fire and victory, sealing a pact that would rewrite history books. The cannon fodder was dead. Long live the Empress. And that is how the Viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Valerius rewrite his destiny and bring the Emperor to his knees, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, if you found out your lover was originally destined for someone else, would you fight fate or walk away? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt, masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art, 2 men, BL, Yaoi, Man 1. Kaiserin, tall emperor, silver hair, piercing gold eyes, wearing black military uniform with silver epaulets and fur cloak, dominant expression, sharp jawline. Man 2. Valerius, shorter slender consort, dark hair, pale skin, wearing intricate white and silver silk robes, looking up defiantly yet intimately. Man 1 is holding Man 2's chin with a gloved hand, intense. Eye contact, romantic tension. Background is a dark Gothic throne room with stained glass windows and falling snow visible outside. Dramatic lighting, cinematic composition, sharp focus, intricate details.